Some moments fracture your life into before and after. For Lena Hart, that moment came when she spotted her ex-boyfriend's predatory smile cutting through the strobing lights of Club Obsidian 6 months after she'd fled with nothing but bruises and terror. Trapped between the bar and his advancing silhouette, survival instinct overrode reason. She did the unthinkable. She sat on the lap of Adrian Moretti, the notorious kingpin whose name alone emptied rooms. One desperate choice, one dangerous man. What happened next would either save her life or end it in ways far worse than anything her ex could deliver. But if you want to see how Lena's gamble plays out, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The bass thundered through Club Obsidian like a heartbeat, relentless, primal, drowning out rational thought. Lena Hart pressed herself against the polished mahogany bar, fingers wrapped around a vodka tonic she hadn't touched in 20 minutes. The ice had melted into submission, diluting the alcohol into something weak and forgettable, just like she needed to be tonight. Invisible. She'd gotten good at it over the past 6 months, keeping her head down, changing her hair from honey blonde to raven black, wearing clothes that swallowed her frame instead of highlighting it. She'd moved from Atlanta to Chicago, then to Philadelphia, each city offering temporary sanctuary before paranoia drove her forward again. New York was supposed to be different, big enough to disappear, crowded enough that one woman meant nothing, but she'd made a mistake. One goddamn mistake. She'd let herself relax, let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, Garrett had given up, that he'd found some other woman to control, to possess, to break down piece by piece until nothing remained but obedience and fear. The strobing lights painted the crowd in seizure-inducing flashes, blue, red, white, darkness, repeat. Bodies moved in synchronized chaos, arms raised, hips swaying, faces tilted toward the ceiling in chemical ecstasy. The DJ transitions were seamless, each track bleeding into the next without mercy or pause. Lena's fingers trembled against the glass. She'd seen him. Just a glimpse, maybe 30 seconds ago, but enough. That distinctive profile, sharp jaw, Roman nose that had been broken twice in bar fights he'd started and finished. The way he moved through crowds like Moses parting the Red Sea, shoulders back, entitled to every inch of space he claimed. Please be wrong. Please let it be someone else. But she knew better. 6 months running had sharpened her instincts into something animal and accurate. The back of her neck prickled with the certainty of being hunted. Another drink? The bartender appeared, young and pierced, eyebrow ring catching the light. Lena shook her head. She needed clarity, not courage from a bottle. Her eyes swept the club again, mapping exits like her life depended on it. Front entrance, too crowded, too obvious. Kitchen exit, probably locked from the inside, might trigger alarms. Bathroom window, she'd checked earlier, too small, bars on the outside. Fire exit near the VIP section. Her gaze drifted toward the roped-off area elevated above the main floor. Velvet barriers. Board security with earpieces. And behind them, a world Lena had never belonged to. Expensive suits, designer dresses that cost more than her monthly rent, champagne in buckets that probably ran 4 figures per bottle. The exit sign glowed red beyond them. If she could just... Well. The voice slithered across her skin like oil. Deep, familiar, carrying that particular tone that had once made her pulse quicken with anticipation and now only triggered nausea. Lena didn't turn around, couldn't, her body locked in place, every muscle rigid with the biology of terror. I've been looking everywhere for you, baby. Garrett stepped into her peripheral vision, positioning himself between her and the rest of the club. Strategic, calculated. He'd always been good at cutting off escape routes. He looked exactly the same, 6'2", broad-shouldered, with dark hair styled with too much product. Expensive cologne that couldn't quite mask the underlying scent of aggression. He wore designer jeans and a black button-down with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and a tattoo of barbed wire encircling his left wrist. She'd once thought that tattoo was sexy. Now she understood it was a warning label she'd ignored. Not interested, Garrett. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Small victory. Leave me alone. His smile was all teeth, no warmth. 6 months you've been running. 6 months you made me chase you across half the country. Do you have any idea how much money I've spent? How many investigators? That's not my problem. Everything about you is my problem. He stepped closer, and she caught the whiskey on his breath. Drunk enough to be volatile, sober enough to be dangerous. The worst combination. You're mine, Lena. You don't get to just leave. The bartender had moved away, suddenly busy with customers at the other end. No help there. Patrons around them were too lost in their own worlds, their own dramas, to notice hers unfolding. I left because you put me in the hospital. The words came out hard, factual. Fractured orbital bone, bruised ribs, concussion. You made me do that. No remorse in his tone, just matter-of-fact certainty. If you hadn't talked back, hadn't disrespected me in front of my friends, I asked you to stop drinking. You embarrassed me. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist with enough pressure to leave marks. Not breaking bones, he was smarter than that in public, but enough to establish control. We're leaving, together. We're going to have a long conversation about respect and loyalty and what happens when you try to make me look like a fool. Lena's pulse hammered in her throat. She'd played this scene 100 times in her nightmares. Every scenario ended the same way. Her compliance, his escalation, another trip to the emergency room where she'd lie about stares and clumsiness while nurses exchanged knowing looks they'd never act on. Not this time. The thought crystallized with sudden, reckless clarity. Not this time. Her eyes swept the club with new desperation. Security was watching the VIP section, not the main floor. The exits were blocked by crowds 3 deep. The bathroom, maybe she could lock herself in a stall, call 911, wait for police who might or might not care about a domestic situation between 2 people with no visible injuries. Then her gaze locked on him. The VIP section's darkest corner, where even the club's aggressive lighting seemed to retreat in deference. A single booth occupied by a single man who somehow commanded more space than the dozen people at the surrounding tables combined. Adrian Moretti. Lena knew the name the way every New Yorker did, whispered in certain circles, printed carefully in newspaper articles that never quite said what he actually did, just implied it with words like alleged and rumored and connected to. He ran things. Complicated, dangerous, lucrative things that existed in the shadows between legal and catastrophic. He sat alone despite the crowd, legs crossed, one arm draped across the booth's back. Perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. Dark hair touched with silver at the temples, worn slightly longer than corporate standard. Maybe 40, maybe older. Hard to tell with men who wore power instead of age. And he was watching. Not the dancers. Not his phone. His attention was fixed on the main floor with the intensity of someone conducting surveillance rather than enjoying an evening out. Dark eyes. From this distance, Lena couldn't tell if they were brown or black, swept the crowd in methodical patterns. Those eyes found her. Held. Something electric passed between them. Recognition, maybe, though they'd never met. Or perhaps just the acknowledgement between 2 predators who'd spotted each other across the savannah. One apex, one desperate. Garrett's grip tightened. Are you even listening to me? I said we're leaving. Now. The plan formed in the space between heartbeats. Insane, reckless, possibly fatal. But staying with Garrett was definitely fatal. Just slower. Lena yanked her wrist free. Garrett was drunk enough that surprise worked. And moved. Not toward the exits. Not toward help that wouldn't come. Toward the VIP section. Lena! Garrett's shout carried over the music, heads turning. Get back here! She didn't run. Running would trigger security, get her stopped, handed back to Garrett with apologies for the disturbance. Instead, she walked with purpose, like she belonged exactly where she was going. The security guard at the velvet rope was built like a refrigerator with a crew cut. His hand came up automatically. VIP only. I'm with him. Lena pointed toward Adrian's booth, praying she hadn't just made a catastrophic miscalculation. The guard's expression shifted. Doubt, suspicion, something else she couldn't name. He spoke into his wrist mic, too quiet to hear over the music. Garrett caught up, grabbing her arm again. Baby, come on. Let's not make a scene. His tone had shifted, public-facing now. Reasonable boyfriend trying to manage his dramatic girlfriend. She'd heard this performance before, usually right before things got worse behind closed doors. Sir, I'm going to need you to step back. The guard's attention shifted to Garrett, and there was no friendliness in it. "This is my girlfriend. We're just having a misunderstanding." "The lady says she's with someone else." "The lady is confused." Garrett's smile was strained. "She's had too much to drink. I'm taking her home." The guard's earpiece crackled. He listened, expression unchanging, then looked at Lena with something that might have been sympathy or might have been pity. "You can go in." Relief and terror hit simultaneously. Garrett's face darkened. "You've got to be kidding me. Do you know who I am? My father owns—" "I know exactly who your father is." The guard's tone could have frozen vodka. "And I know who owns this club. You want to make this a problem, we can absolutely do that. But I don't think you want that kind of attention." The threat hung in the air, unsubtle and effective. Garrett's jaw clenched, muscles jumping beneath skin. For a moment, Lena thought he might actually throw a punch. Consequences be damned. Then something shifted in his expression, recognition of waters too deep to navigate, drunk and angry. "This isn't over," he said, looking past the guard to Lena. "Not even close." Then he turned and disappeared into the crowd. Lena's knees nearly buckled with relief, but she locked them straight. She'd made it past the first obstacle. Now came the harder part. The guard unhooked the velvet rope. "Go ahead." The VIP section was a different world. Quieter, though the music still pounded through the floor. Climate-controlled. She hadn't realized how hot the main floor was until cool air hit her sweat-dampened skin. The furniture was actual furniture, not the cheap tables and stools below. Crystal instead of glass. Bottles with labels she couldn't pronounce. And at the far end, in that darkest corner, Adrian Moretti waited. Lena forced herself to walk steadily across the space. Every eye in VIP tracked her movement, calculating, judging, wondering who she was and what she was doing here. She felt naked under the scrutiny despite being fully clothed. Adrian didn't stand as she approached. Didn't smile or acknowledge her beyond that steady, unwavering gaze that seemed to catalog every detail. Up close, he was older than she'd thought. Mid-40s, maybe, with the kind of face that had earned its lines through decisions rather than laughter. Strong jaw, straight nose, lips pressed into a neutral line that gave nothing away. But his eyes, they were dark brown, almost black in the VIP section's moody lighting, and they were intelligent, dangerously so. This was a man who missed nothing, forgot nothing, and used everything. Lena's courage wavered. What the hell was she doing? Then she remembered Garrett's grip on her wrist. The hospital, the months of running. She sat down. Not beside Adrian on the booth's bench, but on his lap. Bold, presumptuous. The kind of thing that could get her thrown out or worse. His body was solid beneath her, muscle and heat, and he went absolutely still. Not tense, just motionless, like a big cat deciding whether the mouse was food or entertainment. "I need help." The words came out rushed, desperate. "Please, just for tonight. I'll explain everything. I'll leave in the morning. I'll never bother you again, but please." "Shh." The sound was quiet, barely audible, but it cut through her panic like a blade. Not aggressive, just commanding. The kind of sound that expected obedience and usually received it. Lena fell silent. Adrian's attention shifted past her, toward the main floor visible through the glass barrier. Following his gaze, she saw Garrett near the bar, phone to his ear, gesturing angrily, making calls. Probably to his father, maybe to friends who owed him favors. "The man who was bothering you." Adrian's voice was deep, textured with an accent she couldn't quite place. East Coast definitely, but refined, educated. "He's the reason you're sitting on my lap pretending we know each other?" It wasn't a question, not really. More like confirmation of facts he'd already assembled. "Yes. No point lying to someone this perceptive. He's my ex. He found me. And you thought I'd be safer than him. I thought you'd be more dangerous than him." The honesty surprised her, but it felt important to be clear. Dangerous enough that he'd back off. Something shifted in Adrian's expression. Not quite a smile, but a recognition of something that might have amused him under different circumstances. Interesting strategy. Climb from the frying pan onto the stove. The stove hasn't sent me to the hospital yet. Yet. He let the word hang between them. Neither promise nor threat, just acknowledgement of possibility. Lena's heart hammered. This was insane. She was sitting on the lap of one of New York's most notorious criminals, asking for protection from an abusive ex-boyfriend, with no plan beyond the next 5 minutes. "What's your name?" Adrian asked. "Lena. Lena Hart." "And your ex?" "Garrett Morrison. His father owns Morrison Construction, big government contracts, union connections, thinks money solves everything." "Richard Morrison's son." Adrian's tone didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Not fear. Men like Adrian Moretti didn't fear construction company owners. But calculation. Spoiled, entitled, history of complaints that daddy makes disappear. Sound accurate? Very. "And you were with him because—" The question should have felt invasive, but his tone was genuinely curious, not judgmental. "Because I was 22 and stupid." Lena's throat tightened. "Because he was charming at first. Because by the time I realized what he was, I was too scared to leave. And when I finally did leave, I had to run because staying meant dying. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually." Adrian studied her with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she held his gaze. Let him see the truth, the fear, the desperation. "You understand what you're asking?" His hand moved, settling on her waist with a possessiveness that was entirely for show, she hoped. "This club is mine. Everyone here knows it. If you stay on my lap, if I let you stay, it sends a message. You become associated with me. That protection comes with complications." "Worse than what I'm running from?" "Different." His thumb moved in small circles against her side, a gesture that could have been comforting or controlling or both. "Garrett Morrison can hurt you in private, in small ways, over time. The people I deal with work faster and permanently. If you're with me, you become a target for anyone who wants leverage. But they'd have to go through you first." "They would." No false modesty, just fact. "And that usually ends poorly for them." Lena swallowed hard. "How long?" "How long what?" "How long would I need to stay? For it to be convincing enough that Garrett backs off permanently?" Adrian's smile was slight, barely there, but it transformed his face from intimidating to something more complex. "You're negotiating the terms of your own protection from someone whose answer could be forever, and you couldn't stop it. That's either very brave or very stupid. Can it be both?" "Usually is." The silence stretched between them, filled with bass and distance conversation and the sound of her own pulse in her ears. Adrian was thinking. She could see it, weighing options and angles she couldn't begin to guess at. Finally, he spoke. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay right where you are for the next hour. We're going to talk, laugh, look like this is exactly where you want to be. Then you're going to leave with me, my car, my driver, very public. Garrett will see it because I'll make sure he sees it. And then? Then you stay at one of my properties. Not with me," he added, reading her expression, "but under my protection. Give it 2 weeks. Garrett will get the message or he won't. If he doesn't, we'll have a conversation he won't enjoy." "What do you get out of this?" The question came out before Lena could stop it. Adrian's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Amusement, maybe, or respect for the directness. "Maybe I don't like men who put women in hospitals. Maybe I enjoy irritating Richard Morrison. Maybe I'm just bored and you're interesting. Does the motivation matter if the result is what you need?" "I guess not." "Then we have an agreement." His hand squeezed her waist once, gently. "But understand something, Lena Hart. You sit on my lap, you leave with me, you accept my protection. That makes you mine in the eyes of everyone who matters. Not as property," he clarified, "but as responsibility. I don't take responsibility lightly, and I don't tolerate people who waste my time or lie to me. Are we clear?" The weight of his words settled over her like a contract signed in blood and witnessed by the universe. "Clear." "Good." Adrian shifted slightly, angling them so his back was to the corner and she faced outward. "Now smile like you're having the best night of your life. Garrett's watching." Lena didn't have to fake it entirely. Despite the terror, despite the insanity of her situation, there was something almost exhilarating about sitting here, protected by someone who made dangerous men nervous. She smiled. Adrian's hand moved from her waist to her back, a casual touch that reinforced the image of intimacy. To anyone watching, they looked like exactly what they were pretending to be, a couple familiar with each other's bodies, comfortable in shared space. "Tell me about yourself," Adrian said, voice pitched for her ears only. "The real version, not the running scared version." So she did. Over the next hour, Lena told him about growing up in Ohio, about her mother who'd died when she was 16 and her father who'd remarried someone Lena couldn't stand, about moving to Atlanta for college, majoring in graphic design before money ran out sophomore year, about meeting Garrett at a bar where she waitressed, thinking he was her ticket to stability. "How long were you together?" Adrian asked. 3 years total. The first year was good, or I thought it was good. He was attentive, generous, wanted to spend all his time with me." She laughed bitterly. All the things that seemed romantic were just control in disguise, wanting to know where I was, who I was with, getting jealous if I talked to male customers for too long. I thought it meant he loved me. It meant he owned you. "Yeah." Lena stared at her hands. "The hitting started in year 2, always with an excuse. I'd pushed him, I'd provoked him, I'd made him jealous. Then came the apologies, the gifts, the promises it would never happen again. Classic cycle. I knew it was textbook abuse, but knowing didn't make leaving easier." "What finally made you run?" "He put me in the hospital." The words came flat, empty of emotion, because feeling would mean breaking down, and she'd done enough of that. "Beat me unconscious because I'd gotten a phone call from a male coworker about a project. When I woke up in the ER, I knew if I went back next time I wouldn't wake up. So I waited until he left for work, packed what I could carry, and ran." Adrian listened without interruption, without the platitudes people usually offered. "No, I'm sorry," or "that must have been hard." Oh, just steady attention that somehow felt more supportive than sympathy. "You have family?" he asked. "Friends?" "Dad won't talk to me. Garrett told him I was on drugs, stealing, lying about the abuse. My father believed him, or wanted to believe him. Easier than admitting he liked Garrett better than his own daughter. Friends?" She shrugged. "Garrett isolated me from most of them. The ones who stuck around got scared when I told them I was leaving. Scared of getting involved, scared of Garrett's family, scared of retaliation. Can't really blame them." "I can." Adrian's tone was mild, but underneath it was steel. "Loyalty matters. People who abandon you when you need them most don't deserve to be called friends." Lena glanced at him, surprised by the vehemence. "You sound like you have experience with that." "Everyone does, eventually." He signaled a waiter who appeared instantly. "Champagne. The Cristal." "I don't need—" "It's not for you to drink." Adrian's slight smile returned. "It's for the image. Expensive champagne, beautiful woman, relaxed conversation. We're selling a story. Might as well use good props." The champagne arrived in minutes, presented with the kind of ceremony usually reserved for royalty. The waiter poured 2 glasses, the bubbles catching light like liquid diamonds. Adrian handed her one. "To new arrangements." Lena touched her glass to his, the crystal singing with contact. She took a small sip. It was delicious, which somehow made it worse. This was her life now, apparently. Drinking champagne that cost more than her monthly rent while sitting on a crime lord's lap, hiding from an ex-boyfriend whose family had money and connections. Surreal didn't begin to cover it. "What do you do?" she asked. "I mean, I know what people say you do, but best not to ask questions you don't want answers to." But his tone wasn't harsh, just pragmatic. "Let's say I manage various business interests. Import, export, real estate, consulting, all very legitimate on paper. And off paper? Still best not to ask." "Fair enough." Lena looked out over the club, watching bodies move in pulsing waves. From up here, everything looked smaller, safer. The chaos was distant, controllable. "Do you see him?" Adrian asked. She didn't have to ask who. Her eyes found Garrett almost immediately, still at the bar, still on his phone, but now he was staring directly at their booth. Even from this distance, she could see the rage in his posture. "He looks angry." "Good. Anger makes people stupid. Stupid people make mistakes." Adrian's hand moved from her back to her hair, fingers threading through the dark strands in a gesture that looked intimate but felt clinical, calculated. "And when he makes his mistake, I'll be ready." The certainty in his voice should have scared her. Instead, it was almost comforting. They talked for another 20 minutes, the conversation flowing easier than Lena expected. Adrian asked about her design work, seemed genuinely interested when she described her abandoned projects. He was well-read, referenced books she'd loved, movies she'd seen, art she'd admired. Not what she'd expected from a man whose reputation was built on violence and intimidation. "You're surprised," he observed, "that I know who Frida Kahlo is." "Maybe a little. People are complicated. I can appreciate Kahlo's work and still break someone's arm if they cross me. The two aren't mutually exclusive." That's a disturbing sentence. It's an honest one. He checked his watch. Expensive, understated, the kind of luxury that didn't announce itself. "Time to leave." "Ready?" "No, not even close." But staying wasn't an option either. "Ready?" Adrian stood, helping her up with a hand that was surprisingly gentle. He was taller than she'd realized, 6'1" maybe, with the kind of presence that made the space around him feel charged. The walk through VIP was slow, deliberate. Adrian kept his hand on the small of her back, proprietary and unmistakable. People watched, some with curiosity, some with knowing smirks, some with expressions Lena couldn't read. The security guard who'd let her in nodded as they passed. "Sir, Miss." Down the stairs to the main floor, the music crashed over them like a wave. Adrian navigated through the crowd effortlessly, people parting without him asking. The kind of deference that came from reputation, not request. Lena caught glimpses of Garrett tracking their movement, phone still pressed to his ear, making more calls, planning something. "Ignore him," Adrian said, voice low enough only she could hear. Eyes forward. They exited through the front entrance, stepping into New York's nighttime heat. The line outside was 50 people deep, all hoping for entry into the packed club they'd just left. A black SUV sat at the curb, engine running, driver already out and opening the rear door. "After you," Adrian said. Lena climbed in, sliding across leather seats that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. Adrian followed, the door closing with a solid, expensive thunk. The interior was spacious, climate-controlled, with tinted windows that turned the outside world into shadows. A privacy screen separated them from the driver. "Where are we going?" Lena asked as the SUV pulled into traffic. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere Garrett Morrison won't think to look and couldn't reach even if he did." Adrian settled into the seat, every line of his body radiating control. "You'll have your own room, your own space, security. No one in or out without my approval. That sounds like a prison." "It's a cage, not a prison." His slight smile returned. "Cages keep things out. Prisons keep things in. You're free to leave whenever you want, though I'd strongly recommend against it for the next 2 weeks. The SUV merged onto a highway, the city blurring past. Lena watched the lights, the late-night traffic, the world continuing as if her entire existence hadn't just shifted on its axis. "Why are you helping me?" The question had been building since she had sat on his lap. The real reason. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, staring out his own window. When he spoke, his voice was different, not softer exactly, but less guarded. "My sister had a boyfriend once. Charming, successful, from a good family. Everything my parents wanted for her, except he had a temper. Started small, pushing, grabbing, verbal abuse. Then it escalated. By the time she asked for help, she had 3 broken ribs and a fractured jaw." Lena's breath caught. "What happened?" "My father was old school, thought it was a family matter, that my sister should try harder to keep her man happy. My mother made excuses. I was 25, just starting to build my own reputation, so I paid the boyfriend a visit." Adrian's expression was carved from stone. He never touched her again. Never touched anyone again, actually, but the damage was done. My sister, he trailed off, jaw working. "Where is she now?" "Dead. Pills, officially, but we both know what it really was." The weight of his grief filled the SUV, heavy and old and permanent. "I'm sorry," Lena said, knowing the words were inadequate. "Don't be sorry. Just stay alive. Stay safe. Let me handle Garrett Morrison and his entitled father and anyone else who thinks money makes them untouchable." The SUV exited the highway, navigating through neighborhoods that got progressively quieter, more expensive. Tree-lined streets gave way to buildings with doormen and security gates. They pulled up to a high-rise that screamed money, all glass and steel, with a lobby visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. The doorman rushed to open Adrian's door. "Mr. Moretti, good evening, sir." "James?" Adrian stepped out, extending a hand to help Lena. "Mrs. Hart will be staying in the penthouse guest suite. She's to have full access, anything she needs, complete discretion." "Of course, sir." James's expression revealed nothing. Not curiosity, not judgment, just professional acknowledgement. They rode the elevator in silence, rising through floors marked with single letters instead of numbers. The doors opened directly into a penthouse that took Lena's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan, the city spreading out like a carpet of lights. Modern furniture that somehow managed to be both stylish and comfortable. Art on the walls that might have been original Rothkos and Pollocks. "The guest suite is through here." Adrian led her down a hallway, opening a door to reveal a bedroom larger than her last 3 apartments combined. King bed with hotel-quality linens. Ensuite bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people. A walk-in closet, currently empty, but waiting. "I'll have clothes sent over tomorrow," Adrian said. "Your size?" "You don't have to." "Size?" Not a request. 6, medium tops, 7.5 shoes. He nodded, making a mental note. "Kitchen's stocked. Help yourself to anything. TV, internet, whatever you need. The door has a keypad. I'll give you the code. Only you, me, and James have it." "What about, if Garrett somehow finds this place, he won't get past the lobby. James's former Secret Service. The building has more security than most government facilities. You're safe here." Lena sank onto the bed, the mattress yielding like a cloud. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet. We have 2 weeks to see if Garrett gets smart or gets stupid." "My money's on stupid." Adrian moved toward the door, then paused. "One rule, you don't leave without telling me. Not to the corner store, not to meet a friend, nowhere. Your safety depends on predictability. Understand?" "Understood." "Good. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll discuss next steps." He left, the door closing with a soft click. Alone for the first time in hours, Lena let herself feel it, the fear, the relief, the absolute insanity of her new situation. She was in a penthouse owned by a criminal, under the protection of a man whose very name made people nervous, hiding from an ex-boyfriend who would absolutely not take this lying down. But she was also safe. For the first time in 6 months, she could breathe without looking over her shoulder. Lena stood, walking to the window. Manhattan glittered below, millions of lives intersecting and diverging in patterns too complex to track. Somewhere out there, Garrett was planning, calling his father, pulling strings. Let him plan. She jumped from the frying pan onto the stove, just like Adrian said. But maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found somewhere hot enough to forge her into something stronger than what she'd been. Something Garrett Morrison couldn't break. The night stretched ahead, full of uncertainty and possibility in equal measure. Lena Hart had made her choice. Now she'd live with the consequences, whatever they turned out to be. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, she was safe. And for now, that was enough. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the guest suite in shades of gold. Lena woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous night crashed back with startling clarity. The club, Garrett, Adrian Moretti's lap and his calculated offer of protection. She'd slept in her clothes, too exhausted and overwhelmed to do anything but collapse onto the bed. Now, in daylight, the reality of her situation felt both more real and more surreal. She was living in a penthouse that probably cost more per month than she'd made in a year, under the protection of one of New York's most notorious figures, hiding from an ex-boyfriend who wouldn't quit. The bedside clock read 9:15, later than she'd slept in months. Lena showered in the marble bathroom, using products that smelled expensive and felt like silk on her skin. Her reflection in the mirror looked different somehow, still scared, still running, but maybe a fraction less defeated. She dressed in yesterday's clothes, wishing she had something clean. The penthouse was quiet when she emerged. Sunlight flooded the open-concept living space, highlighting art that definitely belonged in museums and furniture that belonged in design magazines. The kitchen gleamed with stainless steel and granite, everything top of the line and barely used. She found coffee, real beans, expensive brand, and figured out the machine after a few minutes of experimentation. The first sip was heaven, rich and strong and exactly what she needed. "Good morning." Lena nearly dropped her mug. Adrian stood in the hallway entrance, dressed in charcoal slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, reading glasses perched on his nose, and he held what looked like a newspaper, actual paper, not a tablet. "I didn't hear you come in," she said. "I didn't leave. My bedroom's on the other side of the penthouse." He folded the newspaper, removing his glasses. "You slept well?" "Better than I have in months, actually." "Good." He moved to the coffee machine, pouring his own cup with the ease of routine. "We need to talk about the immediate future. How much Garrett knows, what resources he has access to, what his likely next moves are." Lena settled onto one of the bar stools at the kitchen island. "He knows I was in New York as of last night. He probably has people watching my old apartment, though I gave that up 3 weeks ago when I couldn't make rent." "Where were you staying?" "Shelter in Queens, women's shelter, no men allowed, security at the door. I felt safe there, but I couldn't stay forever. Was looking for work, saving money, planning my next move when..." She gestured vaguely. "Last night happened." Adrian leaned against the counter, coffee cup in hand, every inch the businessman despite the dangerous reputation. "Garrett's father, Richard Morrison. Tell me about their relationship." "Toxic. Richard's a bully who raised a bully. Everything's about the Morrison name, Morrison legacy, Morrison power. Garrett's his only son, 2 younger sisters who basically don't exist as far as Richard's concerned. All the pressure, all the expectations, all focused on Garrett, who crumbles under pressure by controlling what he can. You." "Exactly." Lena wrapped both hands around her mug, seeking warmth despite the temperature-controlled apartment. "Richard knows about the abuse. Has to. He's paid off cops, paid medical bills, made complaints disappear, but he sees it as Garrett being a man, taking charge of his household. Old-school misogyny dressed up as traditional values. Money makes people think they're immune to consequences. Does it?" The question came out sharper than intended. "Seems to work pretty well for people like you, too." Adrian's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe, for the directness. "Fair point. Difference is, I know exactly what I am and don't pretend otherwise. Richard Morrison thinks his construction empire and political connections make him respectable. They don't. They just make him rich." A phone buzzed. Adrian pulled it from his pocket, glanced at the screen, and his jaw tightened fractionally. "Problem?" Lena asked. "Information." He tapped out a quick response, then pocketed the phone. "Garrett filed a missing persons report this morning. Claims you're mentally unstable, possibly a danger to yourself, that he's worried for your safety." Rage flared hot in Lena's chest. "Of course he did. It's the perfect play. Now if anyone sees me, they'll call him thinking they're helping. And if I try to get help from police, they'll have his report on file painting me as crazy. It won't work." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I'm going to make a call of my own." Adrian pulled out his phone again, this time actually dialing. "Yes, Detective Reeves, please tell him it's Adrian Moretti regarding the Morrison missing person report. I'll wait." He put the phone on speaker, setting it on the counter between them. A male voice came through moments later, cautious and professional. "Mr. Moretti, what can I do for you?" "The missing person report filed this morning by Garrett Morrison, regarding Lena Hart." "I'm familiar with it." "You can close it. Miss Hart is safe, of her own free will, and wishes no contact with Mr. Morrison due to his documented history of domestic violence." Silence on the other end. Then carefully, "Does Ms. Hart wish to file charges?" Adrian looked at Lena, eyebrow raised in question. She shook her head. Filing charges meant court appearances, facing Garrett directly, his lawyers tearing apart her credibility. She'd been through it before with the hospital visit. The case went nowhere, buried under Morrison money and influence. "Not at this time," Adrian said, "but the missing person report is false and should be noted as such. I'll make sure the file reflects that Ms. Hart has been located and is safe." The detective's tone suggested he was walking a careful line between two powerful men. Anything else? That's all. Thank you, detective. The call ended. Adrian pocketed his phone and returned his attention to Lena. That buys you some time. Garrett can't use police to find you now. But he can use private investigators, his father's connections, security companies that don't ask too many questions. Let him try. Adrian's confidence was absolute. This building is a fortress, and you won't be here alone. I'm arranging security. I don't need a babysitter. You need someone who can shoot back if Garrett gets creative. He said it matter-of-factly, like discussing weather. Her name is Maya Chen, former military, current head of my personal security team. She'll stay in the second guest room, give you space, but be available if needed. Lena wanted to argue, to insist she could take care of herself, but the truth was she couldn't. Not against Garrett's resources, not against his father's money and connections. Okay, she said quietly. Smart. Adrian checked his watch. I have a meeting in an hour. Maya will be here by noon with clothes for you. In the meantime, make yourself at home. The code for your room is 4729. Memorize it. Don't write it down. 4729. Got it. He moved toward the hallway, then paused. Lena, you asked last night why I'm helping you. The answer I gave was true, but incomplete. You sat on my lap in a room full of people who watch my every move. That took either desperation or courage, and I'm betting on both. I respect that. So yes, this started as me evening a score with Richard Morrison. But now it's about making sure someone brave enough to ask for help actually gets it. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving her alone with expensive coffee and complicated thoughts. The morning passed slowly. Lena explored the penthouse cautiously, feeling like an intruder despite Adrian's invitation to make herself at home. The living room held a sound system that probably cost more than a car. The terrace offered 360 views of Manhattan, the city sprawling in every direction. His office, door slightly ajar, contained floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a desk that looked antique and priceless. She didn't go into his bedroom. Some boundaries felt important to maintain. At 11:45, the elevator chimed. Lena tensed, then remembered the security. No one could access this floor without authorization. The woman who stepped out was petite, Asian, maybe 35, with short black hair and the kind of posture that screamed military training. She wore tactical pants and a fitted black shirt with the equipment belt that probably held weapons Lena didn't want to think about. Lena Hart? Her voice was crisp, professional. That's me. Maya Chen, Mr. Moretti briefed me on your situation. She set down 3 large shopping bags from stores Lena recognized as expensive. I brought clothes, basics, some options, guessed at style based on what you're wearing. If I got it wrong, we can exchange. You didn't have to. Mr. Moretti's orders. And between you and me, he's particular about presentation. You're under his protection, which means you represent him now. Image matters. It should have felt insulting, being treated like a dress-up doll. But Maya's tone held no judgment, just pragmatic assessment of their reality. Lena rifled through the bags. Jeans that fit perfectly, soft t-shirts, a leather jacket that must have cost a fortune, comfortable shoes and heels, undergarments in her exact size, even pajamas, toiletries, makeup. How did you know all my sizes? Maya's slight smile held secrets. I'm very good at my job. Over the next hour, Maya did a security sweep of the penthouse, checking windows, testing locks, examining sight lines from neighboring buildings. She was thorough, professional, and completely uninterested in small talk. Finally, she returned to the living room where Lena sat pretending to read a magazine. Building security is solid. Windows are bulletproof glass. Only 3 access points to this floor: elevator, fire stairs, and roof access. All monitored, all controlled. You're safe here. What about when I leave? Do you need to leave? I can't stay locked in here forever. Maya settled into a chair, relaxed but alert. Mr. Moretti's instructions were clear. You don't leave without advance notice and security escort. That means me or one of his other team members. No exceptions. That sounds like prison. It sounds like staying alive. Maya's expression softened fractionally. I read your file. I know what Garrett Morrison did to you. I also know what men like him do when they feel humiliated. Last night, you embarrassed him publicly, choosing Mr. Moretti over him. That's not something his ego will tolerate. So what? I just hide here indefinitely? You hide here for 2 weeks while Mr. Moretti handles the situation. Then we reassess. Maybe Morrison backs off. Maybe he doesn't. But either way, you'll have options you don't have now. Lena hated the logic because it was sound. What exactly does handling the situation mean? Best not to ask questions you don't want answers to. The same thing Adrian had said. Lena was starting to understand this world operated on willful ignorance. Don't ask. Don't tell. Don't think too hard about the methods as long as the results kept you safe. Her phone buzzed. She'd turned it off last night, forgotten about it until now. 15 missed calls from Garrett, 37 text messages, a voicemail box she was afraid to check. Don't respond, Maya said, noticing her expression. In fact, give me the phone. What? No, it's my phone. It's also a tracking device. Garrett knows your number, probably has software on it from when you were together. As long as it's on, he can find you. Reluctantly, Lena handed it over. Maya removed the battery, pocketed both pieces separately. We'll get you a new phone, new number, only give it to people you absolutely trust. I don't have people I absolutely trust. You have Mr. Moretti. You have me. Start there. The afternoon dissolved into strange domesticity. Maya made lunch, surprisingly good pasta with vegetables, while Lena changed into new clothes that fit like they'd been custom-made. They ate in companionable silence, two women from completely different worlds sharing a table because violence had brought them together. Can I ask you something? Lena ventured. Depends on the question. How did you end up working for Adrian? Maya considered, fork pausing halfway to her mouth. I was Army, military police. Did 2 tours, came home with PTSD and a general discharge that wasn't quite honorable. Couldn't get hired anywhere legitimate because of the discharge. Couldn't go back to civilian life because I didn't know how to function without structure and mission. I was about 3 days from homeless when Mr. Moretti found me. Found you how? I broke into his warehouse looking for something to steal and sell. Got about 10 feet inside before his guys grabbed me. Should have killed me or turned me over to cops. Instead, Mr. Moretti interviewed me personally, asked about my background, my skills, why I was stealing, then he offered me a job. Just like that? Just like that. Said he respected military service, that my discharge was bullshit politics, and that people deserve second chances if they were willing to work for them. 5 years later, I run his security team. Make good money, have purpose, have people who depend on me. He gave me my life back. Lena heard the loyalty in Maya's voice, absolute and unwavering. You'd do anything for him. Within reason, yes. But here's the thing about Mr. Moretti. He doesn't ask for anything. He's specific, clear about expectations, and doesn't ask his people to compromise themselves. I've never had to do something that violated my personal code while working for him. That's rare in this business. What exactly is this business? Maya's smile was slight. Best not to ask questions I don't want answers to. Yeah, I'm getting that. They cleaned up together, falling into an easy rhythm. Maya was good company, quiet but not cold, professional but not distant, the kind of person you'd want watching your back. Evening came with city lights flickering to life across Manhattan. Adrian returned at 7, loosening his tie as he entered, looking tired in a way that suggested mental rather than physical exhaustion. How was the meeting? Maya asked. Productive? Morrison Sr. reached out through intermediaries, wants to negotiate. Lena's stomach dropped. Negotiate what? Adrian poured himself whiskey from a crystal decanter. Return of his son's property. His words, not mine. I declined the negotiation. What did you say? That Ms. Hart is under my protection by her choice, that she's not property, and that if Garrett Morrison comes within 100 yards of her, I'll consider it a personal insult requiring a personal response. He took a slow sip. Richard didn't like that answer. What's he going to do? Posture, make threats, try to leverage political connections. He'll discover rather quickly that my connections run deeper and darker than his. Then he'll either back off or escalate. My money's on escalation. Ego and stupidity usually go together. Maya stood, sensing dismissal. I'll be in my room if you need me. After she left, silence settled over the penthouse. Adrian moved to the windows, staring out at his city with the expression of someone who owned it in ways the deed couldn't capture. You look worried, Lena said quietly. I'm calculating. Different thing. He didn't turn around. Richard Morrison is connected. Unions, construction, city contracts. He has leverage in legitimate circles I generally avoid. If he pushes hard enough, causes enough noise, it could complicate my operations. So you're regretting helping me? No. He finally faced her, expression serious. I'm planning for complications. That's not regret. That's strategy. You're under my protection until this resolves. That doesn't change regardless of how inconvenient it becomes. Why? The question burst out before she could stop it. Why does my protection matter more than your business? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, swirling whiskey in his glass. Because business is about money and power. Protection is about principle. And I've learned the hard way that if you compromise your principles for convenience, you lose the only thing that makes power worth having. Your sister. My sister. Among others. He finished his whiskey, set down the glass with careful precision. Have you eaten? Maya made lunch. Then let me make dinner. I assume you like Italian? The domesticity of the offer jarred against everything else. You cook? I'm full of surprises. His slight smile returned, transforming his face. Come on, if we're going to spend 2 weeks in close quarters, we might as well be civilized about it. The kitchen became unexpectedly warm as Adrian moved through it with confident familiarity. He assembled ingredients, fresh pasta, tomatoes, basil, garlic, and set to work with the focus he probably brought to everything. You really cook, Lena said, watching him dice garlic with professional precision. My mother insisted all her children know how to feed themselves. Said depending on others for basic needs was weakness. His hands moved steadily, muscle memory guiding the knife. She was right about a lot of things. Wrong about others, but right about self-sufficiency. She's still alive? Yes. Retired to Sicily, refuses to speak to me because of my career choices. Sends a card every Christmas with Bible verses about redemption. No bitterness in his tone, just acceptance. We all make our choices. Do you regret yours? Adrian paused, considering. I regret the necessity of them. I don't regret the execution. This world, my world, has rules. Harsh ones, but clear. You keep your word, protect your people, punish betrayal, reward loyalty. It's simpler than the legitimate world where people smile while stabbing you in the back. That's a cynical view. It's an experienced one. He started the sauce, olive oil shimmering in a heated pan. You've met Garrett Morrison. Respectable family, legitimate business, all the right connections. And he beat you unconscious. Tell me which world is more honest, mine where violence is acknowledged, or his where it's hidden behind closed doors and polite smiles. Lena had no answer to that. They ate at the dining table, Adrian serving pasta that rivaled anything she'd had in restaurants. The conversation flowed easier than it should have between a crime lord and the woman he was protecting. They talked about books, movies, the city, carefully avoiding topics that cut too close. What will you do? Adrian asked eventually. After this is resolved. After Garrett's no longer a threat. I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead in months, just focused on surviving day to day. You have design skills. Why not use them? Because I haven't worked in 3 years. My portfolio is outdated, my references are from a life I can't go back to, and my work history has a giant gap I can't explain without admitting I was running from an abusive ex. So lie. Say you were traveling, freelancing, taking care of a sick relative. The world doesn't need your truth, Lena. It just needs a story it can accept. The pragmatism was almost shocking. You make it sound easy. It is easy. The hard part is deciding what you want to build once you're free. The mechanics of getting there are just details. Lena pushed pasta around her plate. What if I don't know what I want? Then you have 2 weeks to figure it out. After dinner, Adrian retreated to his office with paperwork and phone calls that Lena definitely shouldn't overhear. She found herself on the terrace, Manhattan stretching endlessly, millions of lights representing millions of lives. Somewhere out there, Garrett was planning, calling his father, leveraging connections, refusing to accept that she'd slipped through his fingers. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, standing on Adrian Moretti's terrace with the city spread beneath her like a promise, Lena felt something unexpected. Hope. She'd spent 6 months running, hiding, surviving. Maybe it was time to start living, to figure out not just how to escape Garrett, but who she wanted to be in a world where he no longer controlled her. The night air was warm, carrying sounds of traffic and distant sirens. Tomorrow would bring new complications, new dangers. But tonight, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Lena Hart felt like herself again. Scared, yes. Uncertain, absolutely. But alive. And that was more than she'd had yesterday. The next 5 days passed in a strange rhythm that Lena couldn't quite classify as normal, but had started to feel like routine. Mornings began with coffee and silence, Adrian already awake and working before she emerged from her room. Maya appeared like clockwork at 8, running security checks and providing quiet companionship that Lena had started to appreciate more than she'd expected. Evenings meant dinner, sometimes takeout, sometimes Adrian cooking with that focused intensity he brought to everything, and conversations that ranged from superficial to surprisingly deep. But underneath the routine, tension built like pressure behind a dam. Garrett hadn't gone quiet. According to Maya's daily briefings, he'd hired 3 private investigation firms, filed harassment complaints against Adrian that went nowhere, and been seen at various Morrison construction sites having heated arguments with his father. Richard Morrison, meanwhile, had started making noise in political circles, calling in favors, applying pressure where he thought it might matter. It didn't matter. Not yet, anyway. Adrian handled each escalation with the same calculated calm he brought to everything else. A phone call here, a meeting there, reminders to people who owed him favors that those debts were being called in. Lena watched him operate from a distance, fascinated and disturbed by how effortlessly he navigated a world built on leverage and controlled violence. On the 6th morning, everything changed. Lena woke to raised voices, Adrian's measured tone cutting through someone else's aggression. She pulled on clothes and emerged from her room to find Maya blocking the hallway, hand resting on her hip where Lena now knew she kept a holstered weapon. "Stay back," Maya said quietly. "What's happening?" Guest, uninvited. In the living room, Adrian stood face to face with a man Lena recognized from photos she'd found during her months researching the Morrison family. Richard Morrison in person was exactly what she'd expected. 60-something, silver-haired, expensive suit, the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. "You've got some nerve," Richard was saying, voice loud enough to carry, "harboring my son's girlfriend like some kind of kidnapping operation. You know who I am? What I can do to you?" "I know exactly who you are." Adrian's voice was dangerously soft. "A man whose son puts women in hospitals and whose solution is money instead of accountability. Now get out of my home before I have you removed." "Your home?" Richard laughed, harsh and ugly. "You think your dirty money bought you legitimacy? You're a thug in an expensive suit, Moretti. I've dealt with men like you my whole life. You can be handled." "Mr. Morrison." Maya stepped forward, putting herself between the 2 men with casual authority. "You need to leave, now." Richard's attention snapped to her, then passed her to where Lena stood frozen in the hallway. His expression shifted, assessment, calculation, contempt. "There she is, the little runaway causing all this trouble." He took a step toward her, and Maya's hand moved to her weapon. "Lena, sweetheart, whatever lies Moretti's told you, whatever he's promised, it's manipulation. Come with me. We'll get you help, get you safe, get you away from this criminal." "I am safe," Lena heard herself say. "Safer than I ever was with your son." "My son loves you. He made mistakes, yes, but what relationship doesn't have rough patches? You ran instead of working through it, and now you're shacked up with organized crime thinking that's an improvement?" The casual dismissal of Garrett's violence as rough patches ignited something hot and sharp in Lena's chest. She pushed past Maya, ignoring the bodyguard's protest. "Your son fractured my skull," she said, voice shaking with rage instead of fear. "He broke 3 of my ribs. He beat me unconscious and left me on the bathroom floor bleeding. Those aren't rough patches, Mr. Morrison. That's attempted murder that you covered up with money and lawyers and threats. Richard's expression hardened. Dramatic accusations from a girl with no proof and a history of instability. Yes, I know about the psych evaluation from your college years, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. Not exactly a reliable witness. The words hit like physical blows. He'd done his research, dug into her past, found the semester she'd nearly fallen apart after her mother's death, and weaponized it. Get out! Adrian's voice cut through the moment like a blade. You have 5 seconds before I stop being polite. You threatening me? I'm giving you a chance to leave with dignity. 5, 4. You're making a serious mistake. 3, 2. Richard Morrison's jaw clenched, muscles jumping beneath expensive cologne and entitlement. For a moment, Lena thought he might actually take a swing at Adrian. Then he smoothed his expression into something resembling civility. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. He headed toward the elevator, pressed the button with more force than necessary. My son wants his girlfriend back. I'm going to make sure he gets what he wants. Your son, Adrian said quietly, is going to learn that some things aren't for sale, starting with Lena's freedom. The elevator arrived. Richard stepped in, his parting look promising retaliation in ways both legal and not. The doors closed, cutting off his glare. Silence crashed over the penthouse. Maya immediately pulled out her phone, making calls in rapid-fire Mandarin that Lena couldn't follow. Adrian stood motionless, staring at the elevator doors with an expression that made Lena's stomach clench. I'm sorry, she said. I shouldn't have engaged with him. I should have stayed quiet. Why? Adrian turned to her, and his expression wasn't angry. It was something more complicated, respect, maybe. You told him the truth, made him face what his son actually is instead of the fantasy he's constructed. That took courage. It also escalated things. Things were always going to escalate. Richard Morrison doesn't negotiate. He dominates. Now we know exactly what we're dealing with. He pulled out his own phone, scrolling through contacts. Maya, increase security. I want eyes on every entrance, cameras checked hourly, and a rotation schedule that ensures someone's always alert. Richard knowing this address means Garrett knows it too. Already on it, Maya confirmed. Carlos and Jin are en route. Full lockdown protocol until further notice. Lena's hands were shaking. She clasped them together, trying to force stillness through will alone. He knew about my psych evaluation. From college. How did he even find that? Money buys access to things that should be private. Adrian's tone was matter-of-fact. Medical records, school transcripts, employment history. If it exists in a database somewhere, Richard Morrison can buy it. So he'll use it against me. Paint me as crazy, unstable, unreliable, classic abuser tactic. Only works if people believe him. Adrian moved to the windows, the morning light harsh against his profile. Richard operates in legitimate circles where reputation matters more than truth. I operate in circles where actions speak louder than paperwork. He can say whatever he wants, won't change the facts. The certainty in his voice should have been comforting. Instead, it highlighted how completely her safety now depended on someone she'd known less than a week, someone whose methods she didn't fully understand and probably wouldn't approve of if she did. What's the plan? She asked. The plan is you stay here, stay safe, and let me handle Richard Morrison and his entitled son. Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, jaw tightening. And it seems the handling needs to happen sooner than expected. What do you mean? Garrett just posted bail for 3 men with assault records, former military, dishonorable discharges, currently employed by Morrison Construction in vague security roles. He showed her the phone, police booking photos of 3 hard-looking men with dead eyes. This is preparation for something violent, Maya swore in Mandarin. He's hiring muscle. Appears so. Question is whether he's stupid enough to try something direct or smart enough to use them as intimidation. My money's on stupid, Maya said. Rich boys who've never faced real consequences usually are. Adrian made 3 phone calls in rapid succession, speaking in careful code that Lena couldn't fully decipher, but understood the general meaning. He was mobilizing his own people, preparing for whatever Garrett had planned. The penthouse transformed over the next hour. 2 more security personnel arrived. Carlos, a stocky Hispanic man with gang tattoos barely visible under his collar, and Jin, a quiet Korean woman who moved like liquid danger. They set up equipment, checked sight lines, established communication protocols with military precision. Lena felt simultaneously protected and trapped. "You should eat something," Maya said, appearing at her elbow with a protein bar. "Adrenaline crash is real. Keep your blood sugar up." "I'm not hungry." Wasn't a request. Eat. Lena ate, the protein bar tasting like cardboard and necessity. Through the windows, Manhattan continued its daily rhythm. Millions of people going about their lives unaware that in this penthouse, lines were being drawn for a confrontation that could turn violent at any moment. Adrian emerged from his office at noon, having spent 3 hours on calls and computer work Lena wasn't privy to. He looked tired but satisfied, the expression of someone who just moved important pieces on a board only he could see. "Richard Morrison just lost his biggest city contract," he announced. "Seems some irregularities were discovered in his billing practices. Very unfortunate timing." Maya's smile was sharp. "Amazing how those irregularities appear right when you need them." "I thought you operated differently than Richard," Lena said. "You said legitimate circles weren't your thing. They're not. But I know people who exist in those circles, people who owe me favors, people who are happy to apply legitimate pressure for illegitimate reasons." Miss Adrian poured coffee, his movements controlled and deliberate. "Richard wants to play power games. We'll play. He'll discover rather quickly that he's outmatched." "And Garrett?" "Garrett's 3 hired thugs had their bail revoked an hour ago. New evidence surfaced about violation of release terms. They're back in holding pending trial that's been expedited to next month." His expression was neutral, but Lena heard the satisfaction underneath. "Garrett's now short his muscle and running out of options. You're backing him into a corner. I'm removing his advantages until the corner is all he has left. Then we'll see if he's smart enough to accept defeat or stupid enough to do something desperate." The afternoon crawled past with the weight of waiting. Carlos and Jin maintained security perimeters. Maya ran drills, checking response times and communication. Adrian worked from his office, managing both the legitimate businesses that funded his lifestyle and the illegitimate ones that built his power. Lena felt useless. She tried to read but couldn't focus. Attempted to sketch designs on a tablet Maya had provided, but creativity died under stress. Eventually, she ended up on the terrace despite Maya's disapproval, staring at the city and wondering how her life had become a chess match between criminals and abusers. "Penny for your thoughts." Adrian joined her, bringing 2 glasses of wine she hadn't asked for but accepted anyway. "I was thinking this all feels surreal," she said. "A week ago, I was sleeping in a shelter, eating ramen, trying to figure out how to disappear permanently. Now I'm in a penthouse drinking wine that probably costs more than I used to make in a month, while men with guns prepare for potential violence on my behalf. Life changes quickly when you stop running and start standing ground." "I'm not standing ground, you are. I'm just here." Adrian leaned against the railing, wine glass held loosely. "You made the choice to sit on my lap instead of going with Garrett. That was you standing ground. Everything since has been logistics." "Some logistics. Private security, political pressure, mysterious evidence appearing at convenient times. You disapprove." "I don't know what I approve anymore. Garrett deserves consequences, but..." She trailed off, unable to articulate the discomfort of watching Adrian operate with such casual disregard for legal boundaries. "But you're uncomfortable with how I deliver them," Adrian finished. "Fair. Most people are until they need the delivery badly enough that methods stop mattering." "Is that what happened to you? You needed something badly enough that you stopped caring how you got it?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring at Manhattan like it held answers he was still looking for. "I told you about my sister. What I didn't tell you was that after her boyfriend put her in the hospital, I went to the police, filed reports, provided evidence, did everything the right way. You know what happened?" Lena shook her head. "Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The boyfriend's family had connections. Charges were dropped. My sister was treated like she'd provoked it, like she was equally responsible. The system failed her completely, so I handled it myself. And when I saw how much more effective that was than trusting institutions designed to protect the wealthy and powerful instead of the vulnerable, I stopped playing by rules that were rigged against people like my sister." What happened to the boyfriend? He's alive, if that's what you're asking. But he'll never hit another woman. Can't swing a fist when both hands are broken in 17 places. The casual admission should have horrified her. Instead, Lena felt something darker, satisfaction. The system had failed her too. Police reports that she went nowhere. Hospital staff who saw the truth but couldn't or wouldn't act. A justice system that favored Morrison money over her fractured bones. I should be disturbed by that, she said quietly. Should be and aren't the same thing. They stood in comfortable silence, drinking expensive wine, while the sun tracked west, painting the city in shades of amber and gold. Below, life continued, traffic snarling and flowing, people rushing to appointments and relationships and lives that had nothing to do with the drama unfolding 40 stories above. Adrian, Lena started, then stopped, unsure how to voice what she was feeling. Go ahead, we're past polite evasion at this point. What happens when this is over? When Garrett's no longer a threat? Do I just leave? Go back to living in shelters and looking over my shoulder, hoping the protection holds? That depends on what you want to happen. I want to stop running. I want to build something that's mine, that can't be taken away by entitled men with money and violence. But I don't know how to do that. I've spent so long in survival mode that I've forgotten what actual living looks like. Adrian finished his wine, set the glass down with deliberate care. Then let's make a deal. You give me 2 weeks of your complete honesty. No hiding, no performing, no trying to be what you think I want. Just Lena Hart figuring out who she wants to be. In exchange, I give you 2 weeks of complete protection and resources to start building whatever life you decide you want. Why would you do that? Because I have more money than I can spend in 3 lifetimes and more power than I know what to do with most days. Using both to help someone who actually deserves it feels like decent resource allocation. You barely know me. I know you had the courage to ask for help from a stranger. I know you stood up to Richard Morrison despite him having every advantage. I know you've survived 3 years of abuse and 6 months running and still managed to keep enough of yourself intact to question whether my methods are ethical. His expression was serious, intent. That's more than enough to know you're worth the investment. The words settled over Lena like a blanket, warm, unexpected, dangerous in their sincerity. She'd spent so long being told she was worthless, that her opinions didn't matter, that she existed only as an extension of Garrett's ego. Having someone like Adrian Moretti say she was worth investing in felt almost painful. Okay, she said. Deal. His slight smile returned. Good. Then let's start with an honest question. What do you actually want to do with your design skills? Not what you think sounds good or what's practical. What would make you excited to wake up every morning? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked what she wanted in longer than she could remember. Her father had opinions about her career. Garrett had opinions about everything. Even well-meaning friends had given advice based on what they thought she should do. But what did she actually want? I want to design spaces, she said slowly, the words feeling their way forward like someone walking in the dark. Not just graphics or logos, actual physical environments. Restaurants, hotels, homes, places where people feel something when they walk in, safe, welcome, inspired, whatever the space is supposed to make them feel. Interior design. More than that, environmental psychology. Using color, light, texture, layout to create emotional experiences. There's research about how design affects mood, behavior, even physical health. I've always been fascinated by it, but it seemed impractical. Not a real career path. Why not? Because it requires capital to start, connections to get clients, a portfolio that proves you can deliver. And I have none of those things. Adrian pulled out his phone, tapping notes. Then we build them. Portfolio first. I have 3 restaurants, 2 hotels, and 4 residential properties that could use redesign. You do the work, document everything, build a portfolio that showcases range and skill. While you're doing that, we establish an LLC in your name, create a business presence, start generating legitimate income and tax history. Lena stared at him. You can't just give me businesses to redesign. Why not? They need the work anyway, and I'd rather pay someone I'm actively helping than some overpriced firm that'll deliver generic corporate design. You do good work, everyone benefits. You do bad work, We learned you need a different career path. Either way, you have real-world experience and a decision based on actual data instead of fear. This is insane. This is practical. I have resources. You have skills. Seems inefficient not to connect them. Maya appeared in the terrace doorway. Boss, we have movement. Adrian's expression shifted instantly, all business. Details. Garrett Morrison just entered the building, talked his way past lobby security claiming he's here for a business meeting. He's in the elevator. Every muscle in Adrian's body seemed to coil, ready for violence but controlled. How did he get past James? James is off tonight. Replacement wasn't briefed on our situation. Lock it down. Carlos and Jin, positions. Lena, inside. Now. They moved as one, Lena following Adrian into the penthouse, while Maya coordinated security with rapid-fire commands into her earpiece. The elevator chimed its approach, floor numbers climbing with inevitable momentum. Adrian positioned himself between the elevator and Lena, his body language shifting into something predatory and dangerous. This wasn't the man who cooked pasta or discussed design philosophy. This was the person whose name made hardened criminals nervous. The elevator doors opened. Garrett Morrison stepped out, and Lena's breath caught. He looked terrible, unshaven, wrinkled suit, the kind of disheveled that came from stress and insomnia. But his eyes were sharp, focused, locked on Lena with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "Baby," he said, voice raw, "we need to talk." "She has nothing to say to you." Adrian's tone could have frozen nitrogen. "Leave, now." "I'm talking to my girlfriend, not you." Garrett took a step forward, and suddenly Carlos and Jin were there, flanking him with the kind of presence that suggested moving forward would be a very bad idea. "I'm not your girlfriend," Lena said, proud that her voice only shook slightly. "I haven't been for 6 months. Leave me alone, Garrett." 6 months you've been running. 6 months I've been looking, trying to find you, trying to make this right. And I find out you've been here for a week, shacked up with this criminal, living in luxury while I'm losing my mind worrying about you. You fractured my skull. That was an accident. I was drunk, we were fighting, things got out of hand. I never meant to hurt you like that. You meant it every other time. Lena felt Adrian's presence at her back, solid and steady. Every slap, every punch, every time you shoved me into walls or locked me in rooms, you meant all of it, Garrett, and I'm done pretending you didn't. Garrett's expression crumpled, tears actually welling in his eyes. The performance was Oscar-worthy. Wounded boyfriend confronting his unstable ex, trying to salvage a relationship she'd destroyed through her irrational fears. "Lena, please. I love you. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I'm getting help. Therapy, anger management, everything you asked for. Just come home. We can work through this together." "No." "You'd rather be here? With him?" Garrett's attention snapped to Adrian, and the tears evaporated, replaced by pure hatred. "You know what he is? What he does? He's a criminal, Lena. He kills people, runs drugs, runs guns, runs every illegal operation in this city. And you think that's safer than coming home with me?" "Yes." The word came out clear, certain. "I'd rather be protected by someone who's honest about what he is than abused by someone who pretends to be something he's not." The blow landed. Garrett actually flinched, his carefully constructed victim narrative cracking under the weight of her rejection. "This is his influence," he said, voice rising. "He's manipulating you, making you think I'm the bad guy when I'm the one who loves you. I'm the one who's always loved you." "You have a funny way of showing love," Maya interjected. "Most people don't send their girlfriends to the hospital with fractured skulls and broken ribs." "Stay out of this. This is between me and Lena." "Nothing is between you and Lena anymore." Adrian's voice cut through Garrett's rising hysteria. "She's made her choice. You need to accept that and move on before this situation becomes something you can't walk away from." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm advising you. There's a difference." Adrian's expression was carved from stone. "You have 10 seconds to get back in that elevator. After that, my security will escort you out in a manner you won't enjoy." Garrett's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Lena thought he might actually throw a punch, might force a physical confrontation that would end with him bleeding on expensive marble. Then something shifted in his expression. Calculation, retreat, regrouping. "Fine," he said. But this isn't over, Lena. You hear me? Not over. You're mine. You'll always be mine. And sooner or later, you'll remember that. He stepped back into the elevator, hitting the button with enough force to make the panel crack. The doors closed on his face, twisted with rage, and something else Lena recognized from their years together. Obsession. The penthouse exhaled collectively. Maya immediately got on her phone, arranging for building security to be briefed and Garrett to be added to a permanent no-entry list. Carlos and Jin returned to their positions, adrenaline slowly fading. Adrian turned to Lena, and his expression had softened back into something almost gentle. "You okay?" "I don't know." Her hands were shaking again. He looked obsessed, yeah. Adrian guided her to the couch, sat beside her. "That's more dangerous than angry. Angry burns out. Obsession builds. What do we do?" "What I should have done from the beginning. We end this. Permanently." The weight of those words hung in the air like a promise and a threat combined. Lena met Adrian's eyes, saw the determination there, the absolute certainty that Garrett Morrison's reign of terror was about to come to a very final end. And despite everything she'd been raised to believe about violence and justice and the right way to handle conflict, all she felt was relief. The relief didn't last. It transformed into something heavier as the reality of Adrian's words settled over the penthouse. Ending things permanently could mean many things, and Lana wasn't naive enough to believe they were all legal or bloodless. "What does that mean exactly?" she asked. "Ending this permanently." Adrian stood, moving to the windows with that restless energy she'd started to recognize as his planning mode. "It means we remove Garrett's ability to threaten you, not physically," he added, reading her expression. "I'm not planning to kill him, if that's what you're thinking, but there are other ways to neutralize someone." "I'm listening." "Garrett's power comes from 3 sources: his father's money, his father's connections, and the fear those create in people who might otherwise stand against him. We've already started dismantling the first 2. Richard lost his biggest city contract this morning. By tomorrow, 3 more will have discovered irregularities that require immediate investigation. His political connections are being reminded that association with Morrison Construction might become inconvenient. Maya joined them, tablet in hand. We've also compiled a comprehensive file on Garrett. Every complaint that was buried, every payoff Richard made to make problems disappear, medical records from 3 different women he sent to hospitals over the past 7 years. It's damning. 3 different women? Lena's stomach turned. "I wasn't the first." "You weren't even the second," Maya said gently. "The first was in college. Fractured collarbone, broken nose. Her family accepted a settlement with an NDA. The second was 2 years before you. Concussion, dislocated shoulder, also settled with Morrison money and legal threats." The knowledge hit like a physical blow. Garrett had done this before, multiple times, and gotten away with it because Richard Morrison's money made inconvenient truths disappear. "Where did you get this information?" Lena asked. "Hospital records are supposed to be private," Maya said with a slight smile, "but everything digital can be accessed if you know the right people. And Mr. Moretti knows all the right people." Adrian turned from the window. "Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow night, Richard Morrison is hosting a charity gala at the plaza. Big event, important donors, city officials, media coverage. He uses it every year to reinforce his image as a philanthropic pillar of the community. And we're going to ruin it," Lena guessed. "We're going to give him a choice. Either he publicly distances himself from Garrett, cuts him off financially, and ensures his son gets the professional help he desperately needs, or we release the file. Every buried complaint, every payoff, every woman his son brutalized while Richard covered it up. Let the media and the district attorney's office decide what happens next. That's blackmail. That's leverage. And before you object on moral grounds, remember that every day Richard enables Garrett is another day some other woman might end up in a hospital, or worse." Adrian's expression was serious. "I'm not doing this just for you anymore, Lena. I'm doing it for the next woman Garrett targets when his obsession with you finally burns out." The logic was sound, even if the methods made her uncomfortable. "And if Richard refuses? If he calls your bluff?" "It's not a bluff. We release the file, let the consequences play out. Richard Morrison might survive the scandal. His business might even recover eventually. But Garrett won't. Not with a paper trail that detailed and that damning. He'll face actual charges from a DA's office that can't ignore evidence that public. Maya pulled up images on her tablet, photos of the plaza's layout, security positions, guest list. The gala starts at 7. VIP arrivals begin at 6:30. Mr. Moretti received an invitation months ago as a major donor. You'll attend as his guest. Me? Lena's pulse quickened. Why do I need to be there? Because Richard needs to see you, Adrian said. Needs to see that you're not broken, not hiding, not the traumatized victim he's probably imagining. You show up looking confident, successful, protected. It reinforces that his son lost and we won. That kind of public defeat hits men like Richard harder than threats. I don't have anything to wear to a plaza gala. Already handled, Maya gestured toward the hallway. Dress is being delivered in an hour. Hair and makeup team arrives at 4 tomorrow. You'll look exactly like someone who belongs at Adrian Moretti's side. The casual efficiency of it all was almost overwhelming. They'd planned this, probably since Garrett's visit, maybe even before. Every detail mapped out, every contingency prepared for. What if I don't want to go? The question came out smaller than Lena intended. What if facing Richard and Garrett in public is more than I can handle? Adrian crossed the space between them, crouching so they were eye level. Then we send the file without the confrontation. Your comfort and safety matter more than theater, but I think you're stronger than you believe. And I think there's power in showing Garrett Morrison that you're not just surviving, you're thriving. The challenge in his eyes was clear. This wasn't just about ending Garrett's threat. It was about Lena reclaiming the parts of herself that 3 years of abuse had tried to destroy. Confidence, agency, the right to exist in spaces without fear. Okay, she said. I'll go. Adrian's slight smile returned. Good. Then let's make sure it's memorable. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation that felt more like training for combat than attending a party. Maya drilled Lena on basic security protocols. Stay within sight of Adrian or security. Don't accept drinks from anyone else. Be aware of exits. Trust her instincts if something feels wrong. Carlos taught her a few simple self-defense moves, the kind that could buy seconds if needed. Jin, surprisingly, gave advice on maintaining composure under stress. Breathe from your diaphragm, she said, demonstrating. Control your breath. Control your emotions. They see fear, they win. You show nothing, you maintain power. The dress arrived in a garment bag that probably cost more than Lena's first car. When she unzipped it, her breath caught. Deep emerald silk that would complement her dark hair and pale skin. Cut to emphasize without revealing. Elegant without being ostentatious. The kind of dress that announced its wearer belonged in rooms where decisions got made and power got traded. Adrian appeared as she examined it, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed. It works? It's beautiful. And probably cost a fortune. Consider it an investment in your new career. Environmental designers need to understand how spaces and presentation intersect. Tonight's your first lesson. The morning of the gala, Lena woke with her stomach in knots. She tried to eat breakfast, but managed only coffee, her appetite destroyed by anticipation and dread. Maya noticed, but didn't comment, just ensured she drank water and took vitamins. Dehydration makes anxiety worse, the security specialist said, and you'll be on your feet for hours. Take care of the basics. At 4, the hair and makeup team arrived. 2 women who worked with silent efficiency, transforming Lena from shelter survivor to someone who could stand beside a man like Adrian Moretti without looking out of place. They swept her hair into an elegant updo that showcased her neck and shoulders, applied makeup that enhanced without masking, created a version of herself that felt both familiar and entirely new. When she finally saw her reflection, Lena barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked confident, powerful. Nothing like the terrified girl who'd sat on a stranger's lap a week ago hoping for salvation. Perfect, Maya said from the doorway. Now the dress. The silk felt like water against her skin, cool and luxurious. It fit perfectly. Whoever had ordered it knew her measurements with unsettling accuracy. Paired with heels that added 3 inches and made her legs look endless, she looked like she belonged at a plaza gala. She looked like someone Garrett Morrison couldn't touch. Adrian was waiting in the living room, and when Lena emerged, something shifted in his expression. Not attraction exactly, though that was there too. Something more like recognition. Seeing the person she could be instead of the victim she'd been. He wore a tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, tailored to perfection, every line emphasizing the power he carried like a second skin. Together, they looked exactly like what they were pretending to be, a couple comfortable with wealth, power, and the spaces where both congregated. "You look stunning," he said simply. "You clean up pretty well yourself." His slight smile appeared. "Shall we?" The ride to the plaza was quiet, tension building with every block. Maya sat in the front with the driver, earpiece active, coordinating with security already positioned at the venue. Carlos and Jin followed in a second vehicle, backup if needed. "Nervous?" Adrian asked. "Terrified," Lena admitted. "What if I freeze? What if I see Garrett and just break?" "Then we leave. Simple as that." He took her hand, the gesture surprising in its gentleness. "But I don't think you'll freeze. I think you'll remember every time he made you feel small and use that to stand taller." Spite can be very motivating. Despite herself, Lena laughed. "That's terrible advice." "It's honest advice. And it works." The plaza rose before them, all historic elegance and modern luxury combined. The entrance was a river of expensive cars and expensive people, photographers capturing arrivals, security checking invitations with polite efficiency. This was Richard Morrison's world, legitimacy and influence dressed up as charity and community service. They stepped out of the car into camera flashes and curious stares. Adrian offered his arm, and Lena took it, letting his steady presence anchor her as they navigated through the entrance. Inside, the grand ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and candlelight, round tables dressed in white and gold, a stage set for speeches and performances that would reinforce Richard Morrison's carefully crafted image. The man himself stood near the entrance, greeting guests with the practiced charm of someone who'd spent a lifetime in these circles. He wore a tuxedo that screamed custom tailoring and old money, his silver hair perfect, his smile revealing nothing of the pressure Adrian had been applying to his business and reputation. When he saw them, his smile didn't falter, not even a flicker. But his eyes went hard, calculating the damage their presence might cause to his carefully orchestrated evening. "Mr. Moretti," Richard said, extending a hand that Adrian shook with cool civility. "I'm surprised to see you here." "I'm a major donor. Why wouldn't I attend?" "Of course. And your lovely companion?" Richard's attention shifted to Lena, and she saw him catalog every detail. The expensive dress, the professional styling, the way she stood beside Adrian without cowering or hiding. "Lena Hart," she said, proud that her voice came out steady. "We've met." "Yes, in my son's home, if I recall. Under different circumstances. When I still believed your son's promises about change. Before I learned that Morrison men don't change, they just get better at hiding what they are." The words landed like grenades in polite conversation. Richard's smile strained, muscle jumping in his jaw. Around them, other guests had started to notice the tension, conversations pausing as people sensed conflict brewing in their midst. "I'm afraid you've been misinformed," Richard said carefully. "My son is a serial abuser you've enabled for years by burying complaints with money and threats." Adrian's voice was quiet but carried. "But we're not here to air family dysfunction. We're here for charity. Speaking of which, I believe we need to have a private conversation, soon, about the future of certain business arrangements and personal situations." Richard's expression went flat. "I don't respond well to threats, Moretti." "Good thing I'm not threatening. I'm offering an opportunity to handle matters discreetly before they become unavoidably public." Adrian produced a business card, offered it with a slight smile that promised nothing good. "My private number. Call within 48 hours. Or don't. Your choice what happens next." He guided Lena away before Richard could respond, moving deeper into the ballroom with the confidence of someone who owned whatever space he occupied. Behind them, Richard Morrison stood frozen, the business card in his hand like a grenade with an uncertain timer. "That went better than expected," Adrian murmured. "Better? You basically threatened him in front of donors and city officials." "I made an offer. Quiet conversation or public scandal. He's smart enough to understand the subtext. They found their assigned table, premium placement, close to the stage, but not so close as to suggest they were part of Richard's inner circle. Maya had positioned herself nearby with a clear view of both their table and the main entrance. Carlos and Jin were somewhere in the crowd, invisible but present. Lena tried to focus on the evening's program, speeches about community improvement and charitable giving, performances by local artists, the careful orchestration of money and influence masquerading as civic virtue. But her attention kept drifting, scanning the crowd for the one face she dreaded and anticipated in equal measure. Garrett appeared during the silent auction preview, moving through the crowd with a drink in hand and rage barely concealed beneath a civilized veneer. He'd cleaned up since his penthouse visit. Fresh shave, expensive tux, the Morrison charm deployed for public consumption. But his eyes were wrong, too bright, scanning too aggressively. He found them. Lena felt his attention like pressure against her skin. Adrian must have felt it too because his hand found hers under the table, squeezed once in wordless support. "Breathe," he said quietly. "You're safe. Nothing happens here." But Garrett was moving toward them, weaving through tables with the determination of someone past caring about consequences. Maya shifted position, ready to intercept if needed. Jin materialized closer, casual but alert. "Lena." Garrett arrived at their table, ignored Adrian completely. "We need to talk, alone." "No?" The word came out stronger than she felt. "We don't need anything. You need to leave me alone." "You don't understand what you're doing, what he's doing." Garrett's gesture toward Adrian was sharp, aggressive. "My father's business is being destroyed. Our family is being attacked, all because you're playing house with a criminal instead of coming home where you belong. I belong exactly where I choose to be, and I choose not to be anywhere near you. This is temporary insanity." His influence. "When you come to your senses, when she comes to her senses," Adrian interrupted, his tone conversational but edged with threat, "she'll remember that you put her in a hospital, that you've done it to multiple women, that your father enabled every single incident because Morrison pride mattered more than anyone's safety." Garrett's attention finally fixed on Adrian, and the hatred in his expression was pure and undiluted. "You're going to regret this, both of you. You think my father's connections are meaningless? You think you can just destroy us without consequences? I think your father is currently calculating whether protecting you is worth losing everything he's built over 40 years. And I think when he does that math, you're going to discover that even unconditional love has limits. You don't know anything about my father. I know he's had 3 more contracts suspended pending investigation this afternoon. I know 2 city officials he considered allies are suddenly too busy to take his calls. I know his accountant received a very interesting visit from the IRS about irregularities in Morrison Construction's tax filings going back 7 years. Adrian's smile was sharp. Your father's spending tonight calculating survival. You're the variable he's deciding whether to cut loose. The blood drained from Garrett's face. You're lying. Am I? Ask him. He's over there watching us right now, wondering if this confrontation is going to make headlines tomorrow. Garrett followed Adrian's gaze to where Richard stood near the bar, surrounded by people who might have been supporters or might have been circling sharks sensing blood in the water. Richard met his son's eyes, and something passed between them, a communication Lena couldn't read but understood in its essence. Garrett was on his own. "This isn't over," Garrett said, but the conviction had drained from his voice. He looked suddenly younger, smaller, the entitled prince realizing his kingdom was crumbling beneath his feet. "Actually, it is." Adrian's tone held finality. "Your father will call me tomorrow. We'll have a conversation about how the Morrison family moves forward. That conversation won't include you having any contact with Lena Hart or any other woman without professional supervision and documented treatment. If you violate those terms, the file we've compiled gets released. Every buried complaint, every payoff, every woman you brutalized. Are we clear?" Garrett opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. Finally, he turned and walked away, his shoulders hunched like a man carrying weight he couldn't support. Lena released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Around them, the gala continued, music, conversation, laughter. But something fundamental had shifted. The threat that had defined her existence for 6 months had just been neutralized in the space of a 5-minute conversation. Is it really over? She asked. The immediate threat, yes. Richard will call tomorrow. He'll negotiate, try to minimize damage, but he'll ultimately agree to our terms because the alternative is catastrophic. Garrett will be forced into treatment, cut off financially if he doesn't comply, and generally neutralized as a threat to you or anyone else. And if he doesn't comply, if he comes after me anyway, then we release the file and let the legal system handle what we've been willing to manage privately. Adrian's expression was serious. But men like Garrett are fundamentally cowards. Take away their money, their father's protection, their sense of immunity, and they collapse. He'll comply. Maya appeared at Adrian's shoulder, leaned in to whisper something Lena couldn't hear. Adrian nodded, stood, and offered Lena his hand. Time to make our exit. We've accomplished what we came for. Staying longer is unnecessary risk. They moved through the crowd toward the entrance, heads turning to track their departure. Richard Morrison watched from across the ballroom, his expression unreadable, but his posture suggesting a man who'd just lost a negotiation he couldn't afford to lose. Outside, the night air was cool after the ballroom's heat. Their car waited, Maya already coordinating their departure with efficient precision. That was incredible, Lena said as they pulled away from the plaza. Terrifying and incredible. You were incredible, standing up to both Morrison men in their own territory. That took real courage. I didn't feel courageous. I felt like I was about to throw up the entire time. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. You did that tonight. Adrian's hand found hers again. Proud of you. The simple words hit harder than expected. When had anyone last said they were proud of her? Not for making them happy or being compliant, but for being brave. The drive back to the penthouse passed in comfortable silence. Adrenaline slowly drained from Lena's system, leaving exhaustion in its wake. She kicked off her heels, curled into the leather seat, and let herself feel safe for the first time since this whole nightmare began. Back at the penthouse, Maya did a security sweep while Carlos and Jin took up positions for the night shift. Adrian loosened his bow tie, poured 2 glasses of whiskey despite Lena's weak protest. You earned it. We both did. They stood at the windows, watching the city glitter below, 2 people who'd started as strangers and become something else through necessity and choice combined. What happens now? Lena asked. Now we wait for Richard's call, finalize terms, ensure Garrett's compliance, and then… Adrian trailed off, staring at his reflection in the glass. And then I leave, Lena finished. Back to my life. Whatever that looks like. Or you stay. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Stay as what? Your project? Your charity case? Stay as someone building a life that's actually hers. You said you wanted to design spaces that make people feel things. I meant what I said about giving you projects. Build your portfolio, establish your business. Create something that can't be taken away. He turned to face her fully. This arrangement started as protection. It doesn't have to end that way. Lena's heart hammered. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe we're both tired of being alone. Maybe we've found something unexpected in this temporary situation. Maybe temporary doesn't have to be the end of it. You barely know me. I know you had the courage to ask a stranger for help. I know you survived years of abuse without losing yourself completely. I know you stood up to your abuser in a room full of his allies without breaking. That's more than enough to know I want to see what happens next. The honesty in his expression was almost painful. Adrian Moretti, one of New York's most dangerous men, offering not just protection, but partnership. The kind built on mutual respect instead of fear or obligation. I don't know how to do this, Lena admitted. I don't know how to be in something healthy after years of something toxic. I don't even know what healthy looks like anymore. Then we figure it out together. No pressure, no expectations beyond honesty and mutual respect. You keep building your life. I keep building mine. We see if those lives work better intersecting than separate. It should have felt too fast, too convenient, too much like trading one dependency for another. But standing there in expensive silk, with the taste of victory still fresh, Lena felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not hope that someone would save her. She'd saved herself by having the courage to ask for help. Hope that maybe, finally, she could build something worth keeping. "Okay," she said. "Let's see what happens next." Adrian's slight smile transformed into something genuine, warm, pleased. "Good. Then tomorrow we start planning your first design project. Tonight, we celebrate not having to look over our shoulders anymore." They touched glasses, crystals singing with contact, and Lena let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the worst was finally behind her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, she was safe, valued, and standing on the threshold of a future that was actually hers to build. And that was worth celebrating. The call came at 9:15 the next morning, exactly when Adrian predicted it would. Lena was nursing her second coffee, still processing the previous night's events, when Adrian's phone buzzed with a number he clearly recognized. He glanced at the screen, met her eyes across the kitchen island, and answered with cool professionalism. "Richard, I expected to hear from you." Lena couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she watched Adrian's expression remain neutral as Richard Morrison presumably laid out his position, his demands, his attempts at negotiation. Adrian listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a pad he'd pulled from his pocket. "I understand your concerns," Adrian said finally, "but you're operating under a misapprehension. This isn't a negotiation. I'm presenting you with a choice. Either Garrett enters a residential treatment program for anger management and substance abuse, remains under psychiatric supervision for a minimum of 2 years with documented progress, and has zero contact with Lena Hart or any other woman without therapeutic oversight, or the file gets released to the media and the district attorney simultaneously. Those are your options." A pause. Richard was clearly objecting, threatening, trying to reassert control. "Your connections won't help you here," Adrian continued, his tone matter-of-fact. "The file includes hospital records, witness statements, and financial documentation of payoffs spanning 7 years, multiple victims, clear patterns. The DA can't ignore evidence that's comprehensive, especially when it's handed to them with media coverage ensuring public attention. You can sacrifice your son's freedom of movement to protect your family name, or you can watch everything Morrison Construction represents burned to the ground. Choose." Another pause, longer this time. 48 hours to have Garrett admitted to a facility I approve of. Full transparency on his treatment, monthly progress reports. If he violates any terms, leaves treatment early, contacts Lena, shows any indication he's not taking this seriously, the file releases automatically. And Richard? Adrian's voice dropped into something colder. "If anything happens to Lena Hart that looks even remotely suspicious, I won't bother with files or legal proceedings. We'll handle it my way. Are we absolutely clear?" Whatever Richard said in response, it must have been agreement because Adrian's expression relaxed fractionally. "Good. You'll receive facility recommendations by noon. I expect confirmation of Garrett's admission by end of day Wednesday. After that, we never need to speak again unless your son proves too stupid to follow simple rules." He ended the call without waiting for a response. Lena released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Is it really done? Garrett will be in a locked psychiatric facility in Connecticut by Wednesday night. Court-mandated treatment as part of a plea deal Richard's lawyers are frantically arranging to avoid trial on assault charges. He'll stay there minimum 2 years, possibly longer depending on psychiatric evaluation. How did you arrange court-mandated treatment when charges were never filed? Adrian's slight smile appeared. Charges are being filed as we speak. 3 of Garrett's former victims agreed to come forward once they knew they weren't alone and that Richard's money couldn't make them disappear this time. With multiple complainants and documented evidence, the DA had no choice but to prosecute. Richard's lawyers are negotiating the plea deal right now, treatment instead of prison, but with strict oversight. The casual efficiency of it was almost frightening. In less than 2 weeks, Adrian had dismantled Richard Morrison's empire of enabling and forced accountability onto a man who'd never faced consequences in his life. The other women, Lena said quietly, they're really coming forward? Maya spoke with them personally, explained the situation, offered support and protection if needed. Once they realized they weren't isolated incidents, that there was strength in numbers, they agreed. Not for revenge, for prevention. So Garrett can't do this to anyone else. Lena felt tears prick her eyes. I should thank them. You should heal. That's all any of you owe each other, the courage to stop the cycle. Adrian moved around the island, close enough that she could feel his warmth. This is over, Lena. Really, truly over. Garrett Morrison will spend the next 2 years in psychiatric care, supervised and controlled. Richard Morrison's business will survive but diminished. His reputation damaged enough that political allies will keep their distance. You're free. The word felt surreal. Free. After 3 years of abuse and 6 months of running, the concept of freedom seemed almost too large to comprehend. I don't know what to do with free, she admitted. Then we figure it out together, starting with your first design project. Over breakfast, Adrian laid out the opportunity with the same focused intensity he brought to dismantling the Morrison family. He owned a boutique hotel in Brooklyn that had been operating with the same tired decor for 15 years. 30 rooms, a lobby restaurant, event space for small weddings and corporate gatherings. The bones were good, the location excellent, but the presentation was dated and uninspired. Full creative control, he said, sliding a folder across the table. Budget of $200,000 for renovations. 6-month timeline from design to completion. You document everything: sketches, materials, process, final results. Build a portfolio piece that demonstrates both vision and execution. Lena opened the folder, found architectural drawings, photos of current interiors, financial projections. This wasn't a casual offer. This was a fully developed opportunity waiting for her to claim it. What if I fail? What if I design something terrible and you lose money? Then I lose money and you learn what doesn't work. But I don't think you'll fail. I think you'll create something remarkable because you understand what it means to need safe spaces. Hotels are temporary homes. You know better than most people what makes a space feel safe versus threatening. The insight was uncomfortably accurate. Lena had spent months in shelters, cheap motels, temporary housing where safety was never guaranteed. She knew exactly what design elements communicated security versus vulnerability. When do I start? Whenever you're ready. The hotel's not going anywhere. Maya appeared in the kitchen doorway, tablet in hand. Boss, we have confirmation. Garrett's admission paperwork is being processed. He'll be transported to Clearwater Psychiatric in Connecticut Wednesday morning. And the monitoring? Full surveillance. If he leaves the facility grounds without authorization, we know within minutes. If he makes unapproved contact with anyone, we're alerted. He's essentially in minimum security prison disguised as a hospital. Good. Adrian stood, checking his watch. I have a meeting downtown. Maya, you're with Lena today. She's going to Brooklyn to tour the hotel property. Wait, today? Lena felt suddenly unprepared. No time like the present. You need to see the space, feel it, understand what it wants to become. Maya can take photos, measurements, whatever you need. An hour later, Lena found herself in the back of Adrian's SUV with Maya at the wheel, heading toward Brooklyn with a strange mixture of excitement and terror churning in her stomach. This was real. An actual client, an actual budget, an actual opportunity to prove she could build something meaningful. The hotel sat in a neighborhood that was clearly gentrifying, craft coffee shops next to bodegas, restored brownstones beside buildings that needed restoration. The hotel itself was a 5-story brick building with architectural charm buried under decades of neglect and poor aesthetic choices. Inside, the lobby was exactly what Lena expected. Beige walls, generic landscape prints, furniture that prioritized cheap durability over comfort or style. The front desk looked like every budget hotel chain's version of professional. The restaurant off the lobby had potential but suffered from fluorescent lighting and booth seating that belonged in a diner. What do you think? Maya asked. I think it's desperate to be something better than it is. Lena walked through the space, already seeing possibilities. The bones are good. High ceilings, original hardwood under this terrible carpet, windows that actually let in natural light. But everything else is fighting against the architecture instead of working with it. She pulled out her phone, started taking photos and notes. The front desk could be relocated to create better flow. The restaurant needed complete lighting, redesign, and furniture that invited lingering instead of quick turnover. The lobby could incorporate local art, plants, seating areas that felt residential instead of commercial. They toured all 30 rooms, each identical, each aggressively bland. Beige walls, dark furniture, generic bedding, bathrooms with builder-grade everything. But each room also had good natural light, decent square footage, and architectural details that suggested the building's original charm. "I can work with this," Lena said, ideas already forming faster than she could capture them. "I can make this somewhere people want to stay, instead of just somewhere they're willing to tolerate." Maya smiled. "Mr. Moretti thought you'd say that?" Over the next week, Lena threw herself into design work with an intensity that surprised her. She created mood boards, sourced materials, sketched layouts, and calculated costs with obsessive attention to detail. Adrian had given her access to his contractor network, and she spent hours in meetings with electricians, painters, furniture suppliers, learning the business side of design that school had never taught her. The work was consuming, challenging, and exactly what she needed. Every hour spent designing was an hour not thinking about Garrett, not processing trauma, not dwelling on the 6 months she'd lost to fear and survival mode. Adrian watched her work with quiet approval, occasionally offering input, but mostly letting her claim this project is entirely her own. Evenings became their time, cooking together, talking about their days, slowly building something that felt like partnership instead of protection arrangement. "You're happy," he observed one night as she showed him fabric samples for the hotel rooms. "I'm busy. Different thing." "You're both. I can tell the difference." He was right. For the first time in years, Lena felt purpose beyond simple survival. She was building something, creating something, using skills she'd thought were dead and buried under Garrett's control. Wednesday arrived with confirmation that Garrett had been officially admitted to Clearwater Psychiatric. Maya showed Lena the surveillance photos, Garrett looking diminished and angry, flanked by Richard's lawyers and facility staff, walking into a building that would be his home for the next 2 years minimum. "How do you feel?" Maya asked. "I don't know yet. Ask me in a month." But truthfully, Lena felt lighter. Like a weight she'd been carrying for so long, she'd forgotten what posture without it felt like. Garrett was contained, controlled, no longer a threat that defined every decision she made. That evening, Adrian suggested they go out to dinner. Not takeout in the penthouse, but an actual restaurant, public and visible. A statement that the hiding was over. "Are you sure?" Lena asked. "What if someone recognizes me? What if you live your life instead of letting fear make your decisions?" He said it gently, but the challenge was clear. Garrett's in Connecticut. Richard's focused on salvaging his business. You're safe to exist in the world again. They went to a small Italian place in the West Village, intimate and warm, the kind of neighborhood spot where locals gathered and tourists rarely ventured. Adrian was clearly known. The owner greeted him by name, led them to a corner table with good sightlines and privacy. Over wine and handmade pasta, they talked about everything and nothing: Lena's design plans, Adrian's legitimate business ventures, movies they wanted to see, books they'd both read. Normal conversation between two people getting to know each other without crisis-forcing artificial intimacy. "Can I ask you something?" Lena ventured during dessert. "Always." "Why me? I mean, really. You could have anyone. Women who aren't damaged, who don't come with violent exes and trauma and complications. Why invest this much in someone you barely knew?" Adrian was quiet for a moment, swirling wine in his glass. "Because you reminded me that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action despite it. Because you sat on my lap in a room full of dangerous people and asked for help instead of giving up. Because every time life gave you a reason to break, you bent instead. That's worth investing in. That's a generous interpretation of desperation. It's an accurate interpretation of strength you don't give yourself credit for." He reached across the table, took her hand. "I've spent 15 years in a business that shows me the worst of humanity. Violence, greed, betrayal, cowardice. You showed me something different, someone different. Maybe I needed that reminder that people worth protecting still exist." The honesty in his expression made her throat tight. "I'm still broken in a lot of ways. Therapy needing, trust issue having, trauma processing ways. Then we find you a good therapist. Process the trauma. Work through the trust issues. Being broken isn't permanent unless you decide it is. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's just possible. And possible is better than the alternative." Walking back to the penthouse, Lena felt something shift in her chest. This thing between them, whatever it was becoming, felt real in a way nothing with Garrett ever had. Built on honesty instead of control, respect instead of fear, partnership instead of possession. 2 months later, Lena stood in the renovated hotel lobby and barely recognized the space she'd first toured. Gone were the beige walls and generic furniture, replaced with warm grays, rich woods, and jewel-tone accents that made the space feel sophisticated and welcoming. The front desk had been relocated and redesigned, now a beautiful focal point instead of a barrier. The restaurant glowed with carefully planned lighting, intimate booth seating, and local art that gave it neighborhood character. Adrian appeared at her shoulder, surveying the transformation with satisfaction. "You did this. We did this. Your contractors, your budget, your trust. My resources. Your vision. There's a difference." He handed her a tablet showing the hotel's booking rates. "We're fully booked for the next 3 months. Rates increased 30% and people are paying without complaint. Trade publications are asking to feature the redesign. You've created something remarkable." The pride in his voice was unmistakable. Lena felt it too. Not arrogance, but earned confidence. She'd taken a tired, forgotten space and given it new life. Proved to herself that she could build something meaningful. "What's next?" she asked. "That's up to you. I have 2 more properties that need your attention if you're interested. Or you start taking outside clients, building a business that's entirely yours. Whatever you decide, you have the portfolio and reputation to support it now." Over the past 2 months, things between them had evolved with surprising naturalness. They'd started as protector and protected, evolved into something like friends, and gradually become partners in the truest sense. Not rushed, not forced, just 2 people who'd found unexpected compatibility in crisis and chosen to see if it lasted beyond necessity. "I want to take outside clients," Lena said. "Build something that's completely mine. But I also want to keep working with you, if that's not too complicated." Adrian's slight smile appeared. "I think we can manage complicated." That evening, they celebrated the hotel opening with the team who'd made it happen. Contractors, suppliers, Maya, and the security personnel who'd become unexpectedly important in Lena's life. It felt like family in a way her actual family never had. People who'd shown up, done their jobs excellently, and supported her vision without trying to control or diminish it. Maya pulled Lena aside during the celebration. "You know he's in love with you, right?" "What? No, you're just living together, building a business together, and looking at each other like you've solved some complicated equation. Trust me. Trust? He's in love. Has been for weeks." "How can you tell?" "Because I've worked for him 5 years and never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you, like you're something precious he's afraid to break but refuses to cage." Maya's expression was serious. "Question is whether you feel the same way." Lena watched Adrian across the room, talking with contractors about some detail of the renovation, animated in a way he rarely was in his other business dealings. He'd given her space to heal, resources to build, protection without possession. He'd asked nothing in return except honesty and effort. "Yeah," she admitted. "I think I do." "Then tell him. Life's too short for people who care about each other to pretend they don't." Later, after the celebration wound down and they returned to the penthouse that had transformed from safe house to home, Lena found Adrian on the terrace where she'd stood months ago feeling hopeful for the first time in years. "Maya says you're in love with me," she said without preamble. Adrian turned, expression carefully neutral. "Maya needs to learn discretion." "She's not wrong, though, is she?" "No, she's not wrong." He didn't look away, didn't deflect. "I didn't plan it. Didn't particularly want the complication, but somewhere between you sitting on my lap desperate and terrified and you standing in a renovated lobby, confident and proud, it happened. You don't have to—" Lena kissed him before he could finish the sentence. It wasn't her first kiss. That had happened 2 weeks ago after too much wine and too much laughter. But it was the first one that meant something beyond exploration. This was claiming, choosing, declaring that what they'd built in crisis could become something lasting. When they finally broke apart, Adrian's expression had transformed into something open and pleased. "Well, that's one way to respond. I'm in love with you too. It's terrifying and possibly terrible timing and definitely complicated, but it's true." Terrible timing would have been 6 months ago when you were still healing and I was still figuring out if protection would turn into something else. Now? He pulled her closer. Now feels exactly right. They stood on the terrace as Manhattan glittered below, two people who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances and somehow built something worth keeping. Not perfect. Perfection was illusion, and they both knew it. But real, honest, built on respect and partnership instead of need and control. 3 months later, Lena signed the lease on her first office space, a small studio in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, where she could meet clients and work on designs. Her business was officially established, LLC paperwork filed, business cards ordered, website live. She had 3 outside clients in addition to Adrian's properties, and a waiting list of people who'd seen her hotel work and wanted similar transformations. She'd also started therapy, working through the trauma of Garrett's abuse with a psychiatrist Adrian had recommended. It was hard, painful work, confronting the ways she'd normalized violence, examining the patterns that had made her vulnerable, building healthier frameworks for relationships and self-worth. But it was necessary work, and she was committed to doing it right. Garrett remained at Clearwater Psychiatric, his monthly progress reports showing slow but steady improvement. He'd be there at least another 18 months, possibly longer. Lena didn't think about him often anymore. He'd become something from her past instead of a threat to her present. Richard Morrison's construction empire had survived but diminished, his political connections severed, his reputation permanently tarnished by association with his son's crimes. Lena occasionally saw his name in business articles, usually attached to words like struggling and downsizing. She felt no satisfaction in his downfall, just relief that his enabling had ended. The anniversary of the night she'd walked into Club Obsidian arrived without Lena initially realizing its significance. She was working late at her studio, finalizing designs for a restaurant client, when Adrian appeared with takeout and wine. "You forgot what day it is," he said, unpacking containers. "Did I miss something? Your birthday's not until—" Then it hit her. "Oh, a year ago today. A year ago today, you made the bravest, craziest decision of your life and sat on my lap asking for help from a complete stranger. Best terrible decision I ever made." I was thinking the same thing. He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a small velvet box that made Lena's heart stop. "Before you panic, this isn't what you think it is. Or not exactly what you think it is." He opened the box to reveal a key. Simple, silver, attached to a keychain engraved with coordinates. "It's the key to the penthouse," Adrian explained. "Your name is on the deed now. Equal ownership. Not as my girlfriend or my partner in the romantic sense, but as someone who's earned the right to have a home that's actually, legally, irrevocably yours. No one can take it away. Not me. Not anyone. It's yours." Lena's eyes burned with tears she didn't bother hiding. "You're giving me half your penthouse." "I'm giving you security. The kind that comes from ownership, not permission. You've built an incredible business, but businesses can fail. You've built an incredible life, but circumstances can change. This?" He closed her fingers around the key. "This is permanent. Safe harbor. That's always there. No matter what happens with us, with your business, with anything else life throws at you. What if we don't work out? What if then we're 2 people who own a penthouse together and figure out how to be civil about it? But I don't think that's happening. I think we're building something that lasts. And if I'm wrong, you still have a home. That's the point." Lena looked at the key in her hand, feeling the weight of what it represented. Not ownership of expensive real estate, but freedom, security, the knowledge that she'd never be homeless, never be desperate, never be so vulnerable that she had to accept abuse to survive. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for being brave enough to ask for help a year ago. Everything good in my life since then traces back to that moment." They ate takeout on the terrace where Lena had once stood feeling hopeful about an uncertain future. Now the future felt less uncertain, still complicated, still challenging, but filled with possibility instead of fear. "Do you ever regret it?" Lena asked. "Taking me in, protecting me, dealing with all the Morrison drama?" "Not once." "Do you regret sitting on my lap?" "Not even a little, though I'm still amazed that worked." Desperation and courage make a powerful combination. Turns out they're also a good foundation for everything else. 6 months later, Lena's design business had expanded to a team of 3, herself, an assistant, and a junior designer she'd hired from the same shelter system that had once housed her. She paid fair wages, offered benefits, and created a workplace culture built on respect and support instead of fear and exploitation. Her client list included restaurants, boutique hotels, residential projects, and commercial spaces. She'd been featured in design magazines, won an award for the hotel renovation, and established a reputation for creating emotionally intelligent spaces that prioritized human needs over aesthetic trends. Adrian had gradually transitioned several of his operations toward legitimacy, using Lena's success as a model for how to build sustainable businesses that didn't require existing in legal gray areas. He'd never fully abandoned his original world that wasn't realistic or probably even possible, but he'd found a balance that let him sleep better at night. Their relationship had evolved into something comfortable and committed without losing the intensity that had brought them together. They fought occasionally, usually about Lena taking on too many clients or Adrian working too late. They made up quickly, both too aware of how fragile happiness could be to waste time on pride or stubbornness. On a Thursday evening in early fall, Lena received a call from Clearwater Psychiatric. Garrett Morrison had completed his 2-year treatment program and was being discharged under conditional release. He'd be required to continue outpatient therapy, submit to random drug testing, and maintain no contact with his previous victims. The news should have terrified her. Instead, Lena felt only distant acknowledgement. Garrett was someone who'd hurt her once, but he wasn't who defined her anymore. She'd built a life he couldn't touch. A business, a home, a relationship, a future entirely her own. "How do you feel?" Adrian asked when she told him. "Free. Really, truly free. He's out there somewhere living his life, and I'm here living mine, and those things don't intersect anymore. He's just someone I used to know who taught me what I won't tolerate ever again." That's growth. That's survival becoming thriving. There's a difference. That weekend, they hosted a dinner party at the penthouse. Maya and her girlfriend, Carlos and his husband, Jin and her partner, Lena's assistant and junior designer, a few of Adrian's legitimate business associates. The kind of gathering that mixed worlds in ways that once would have seemed impossible. Looking around the table at people laughing, talking, enjoying food and company, Lena felt profound gratitude. A year and a half ago, she'd been sleeping in shelters and eating ramen, convinced her life would always be defined by fear and running. Now she had family, not by blood, but by choice, and a future she'd built with her own hands. "You look contemplative," Maya observed, refilling wine glasses. "Just thinking about how much has changed, how different everything is from where I thought it would be." "Better or worse?" "So much better, it's almost scary." Adrian found her later on the terrace, their spot for important conversations and quiet moments. The city spread beneath them, millions of lights representing millions of lives intersecting in patterns too complex to track. "I love you," he said simply. "Not because you needed saving or because I needed someone to save, but because you're brilliant and brave, and you create beautiful things, and you make me want to be better than I am. I love you too, for seeing me when I felt invisible, protecting me without owning me, and believing I could build something worth having when I'd forgotten how to believe in myself." They stood together as night deepened, two people who'd found each other in crisis and chosen to build something lasting from that foundation. Not perfect. They were both too damaged and complicated for perfect, but real, honest, and entirely their own. Lena thought about the terrified woman who'd sat on a stranger's lap a year and a half ago, desperate and out of options. She'd been so scared, so convinced she was making a mistake that would end worse than staying with Garrett. She'd been wrong. That desperate choice had been the beginning of everything good that followed. The career she'd built, the home she owned, the relationship that challenged and supported her in equal measure, the life she'd claimed as entirely her own. Some moments fracture your life into before and after. For Lena Hart, that moment came when she chose courage over resignation and asked for help from the most dangerous man in the room. Everything after had been the slow, difficult, beautiful work of healing and building and becoming someone who didn't just survive but thrived. And standing on that terrace with Adrian's hand in hers and her future stretching vast and full of possibility, Lena knew with absolute certainty that she'd choose that same desperate moment again. Because sometimes the scariest decisions lead to the most extraordinary destinations. And she'd finally arrived at hers.